In this episode, I talk about what pens feel good, brass and copper nibs, and my pens that got away. Hey there, Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com, and it is episode number 168 of Goulet Q&A. Did I just say that twice? I don't know. I'm a bit fried today, but I will do my absolute best to power through and give you an awesome Q&A today. Had some good stuff happening last week. Restocked our Conklin Nighthawk. So this is a pen that isn't exclusive to us, and we had done it months ago, sold out, waiting for more to come in from our manufacturer, Conklin. These pens have Goulet nibs on them. They're a matte carbon fiber, similar body to a Conklin Durograph. So if you like that pen, you may like this. And it had a bit of a redesign on the cap too. Got some feedback initially on the first batch that the nib was drying out a little bit too much. So if you have one like that, let us know. We can help you out. They redesigned the inside and the cap a little bit. I think what was happening is the seal was not super tight around the clip. So it was just allowing a little air to get in there. And I think that this batch will be much better. So hopefully you like that. So check those out. Those are 99 bucks on our site. Also, the Conklin Herringbone is a new pen that is in its third generation now. It came back. It used to be a pen that was over $100, but now it has come back and it's only $56. So they completely changed the design. It used to have a flat top. It used to be much fatter. It used to have this like thick lacquer over top of it. It still is lacquered now, and it's still bright, vibrant colors, and it's got this kind of herringbone pattern to it. But it's sleeker. It's more of a cigar shape. And the price is lower too. The price is only $56. So if you're interested in that, we have it in a few different colors. You can check those out on our site. Let's see here. The Faber-Castell Write Ink is one also that has come along. Sorry, I have a lot of products on my desk today. It's getting a little out of control. Faber-Castell Write Ink. So I think I mentioned this one to you guys a few times before, but the nib is actually slightly different than what's on the loom. I thought it was the same, but it is slightly different. It writes somewhat similarly, maybe a little bit toothier, but still good. And it has this kind of fingerprint design. I'll actually be talking about this in one of the questions that's going to come up a little bit later. And then the Visconti Divina Excellence. So this is a really cool pen. I'm a big fan of the Visconti Divina anyway, but this pen is particularly attractive. So this pen has bronze trim. So usually the Divina is, black or blue or whatever, and it has sterling silver trim. This one is bronze, so it's kind of cool. It's got a little bit kind of a rose gold kind of look to it, and it's got a bronze coated nib as well. I don't actually know exactly what the coating is on the nib. I'll try to find that out, but at this time I don't know, but it is definitely bronze colored to match the rest of the trim. A plating would make the most sense to me. It's still a palladium nib, so they must have a bronze plating on it. It's got the hook safe lock cap, which I absolutely love. Really solid pen. It's priced like the other Divinas, just under $1,000, so it's a bit rich on there, but if you log into your Goulet Pens account, you can see our best price that we have on that one. Very cool pen. Love the way that it looks. And then we have the Lamy Color gift sets, which I've got a little plastic on this one. It's kind of hard to see what it is, but it's basically an all-star that has one of every color of cartridge plus a converter, all for $39.99. So pretty good price, considering that that's almost what you pay just for the All-Star by itself. And it's come in nice little packaging and stuff like that. So we got that in a couple of different options for you. So you can check that on the site. What else we got? The Faber-Castell water brushes. So we don't do a lot with non-fountain pens, honestly, and especially when it comes to the way of brushes and stuff like that. Definitely not like 100% our wheelhouse, but because it takes fountain pen ink, it's something that people have been asking for brushes and stuff like that. So we thought we'd explore them a little bit. Our own team uses not often these ones, but has used other types of brushes and things like Monday Matchup and some of that kind of stuff. So we thought we'd explore it a little bit, dip our toes in the water. If it happens to work out, that'd be great. If not, we'll learn something. So, nylon tip, so they're, they're not like premium brushes, not like weasel hair type stuff, but functional from Caran d'Ache. So You know, for our team, you know, I think maybe not using them to actually fill with ink necessarily, but dipping and then filling with water and using them for you know, ink washes and stuff like that, I think is kind of more commonly what they are using it for. But it's something that you can kind of mess around with, especially if you're doing any ink washing or mixed media type stuff. Could be something fun to play with, and we thought it was affordable enough to give it a try. So you can explore that one a little bit. And then I don't have this one to show, but the Field Notes Pitch Black. So it's a black cover Field Notes, just in a regular 3-pack for just under 10 bucks. Now is in lined and dot. So it's in both of those versions now, which is kind of cool, and they changed the cover just a little bit. And then the last thing I have to show you before we get into the questions is the Lamy 2000 set. So this is something that we have as an exclusive at Goulet for the time that we have them. It's a limited number, it's not a limited edition, they're not numbered or anything like that, but it's just a regular Lamy 2000 Macrolon with a bottle of blue-black ink and kind of this nice presentation for the same price of a normal Lamy 2000. So that's kind of cool. So it's kind of a nice little bonus for you to get that. So we have a certain number of these, and once they sell out, that will be it, and it will go back to just being the Lamy 2000 without the gift set thing that we'll have on our site. So anyone who's buying a Macrolon Lamy 2000 from our site right now, you're going to get this. I hope you're okay with that. I don't know why you wouldn't be. All right, let's get into some questions, shall we? I gotta make some room. I'm just like, my desk is a mess right now. All right, first question I have. This is a pen and writing question from Shimmertastic on Twitter. What do you think of textured pens, and what are your favorites? Textured pens, so they can be kind of polarizing. You know, most pens are made to be smooth because I think that's the safe way to go for sure. Plus, it's easier to put a finish on those. Any kind of texture or any kind of you know, thing like that you go on, it's a little riskier. So I think most pens tend to lean a little smooth, but I think the way that the pens feel is definitely a big deal. There's a lot of sensitivity that you have in your fingertips, so it's actually surprising how much you can sense just by touch. You know, most pens are smooth. I think when you get into pens that are basically not smooth, you kind of get into what I view as like kind of two different categories. You have textured ones, like hardcore textured ones, and you have ones that are kind of like a matte finish, right? So some matte finish ones, for example, would be like an All-Star, right? It doesn't feel quite as smooth as, I'm trying to think of a smooth pen that I have here. All the pens I have are not smooth. You know, okay, so I've got an Aurora Optima here, like very polished, very smooth, just very slick. The All-Star is not the same way. It's smooth, this is not textured, but it has a matte finish to it, and it definitely feels different. A lot more pens kind of fall into that category, I think, into kind of that matte category. You know, the Pilot Metropolitan, it's got that anodized finish, that's a little matte. You know, ones that, you know, okay, the Pilot Vanishing Point in the matte black definitely has that matte feel to it, as opposed to some of the glossier Vanishing Points, which feel really slick. So that's one distinction to make. I think those are, generally speaking, you know, pretty universally accepted. And there's even some divisiveness there, whether people like, you know, the All-Star versus the Safari and stuff like that. And you get into some of that with the finish. And then you get into some things that kind of in a gray area, I feel, where I don't know if you'd consider it textured or whether it's just kind of the nature of the finish. Something like the Lamy 2000, it's got like a brushed finish, so it has kind of a matte look, but it definitely has a bit of feel to it. Could fall into that category. And then you get into things like the types of material that can make a difference. Like if you get into ebonite, was that textured? Well, it's definitely got a different feel to it. You know, it's basically rubber, so it's got a different feel to it. Or you get into a Visconti Homo sapiens, that is, and kind of falls in the same category as ebonite. Where it's made of volcanic rock and has a bit of grab to it. So again, not 100% textured. I love all these pens. But when it comes to actual textured pens, so this is where ones where it is just straight up not smooth. Like there is something there to disrupt the feel of what's happening on the pen. So that, I have the Conklin Herringbone would fit into that category. That's a new one that I just mentioned that definitely fits into that group. And I'll kind of show you, I'll zoom in a little bit and show you, not all the way, but I'll just show you exactly the texture I'm talking about here. So you get a little bit better idea. So you can see there's definitely a texture, and I can feel it on my fingertip. You know, it'll maybe even make a little noise as you're rubbing your finger back and forth. And some people really like it. You know, me personally, with textured pens, I tend to kind of handle them more, just because I like to feel that texture a little bit. That can definitely be the case. Some other pens that I have, This is another recent one that I told you I'd bring up again, but the Faber-Castell Write Ink. Now this one, the texture may bother you because it's not as consistent. It's got that fingerprint on it, but it is a raised texture, so you definitely feel that as you're grabbing the pen. Another good one, and this one is literally designed for the texture. This is the Tactile Turn Gist. They even lean into the name tactile, and it is made because it has a spiral cut all the way up the pen, which means that it kind of feels like that. You can even hear that a little bit in the audio probably, but it's definitely got kind of that, like when you rub your fingers along a zipper kind of thing, it's got kind of that feel. This one really wigs people out. My wife hates the feel of this pen. I don't mind it at all. It's just kind of my thing. So it's getting a nice patina on it too. This is a copper one, so yeah, I don't like to polish my copper stuff. I like to let it age naturally. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, definitely Tactile Turn fits into that group. Hit or miss as to whether or not people actually like it or not. The Faber-Castell Emotion. So this one's kind of interesting because it's got some design elements to it, like around the center band here. It's got some kind of notches cut out of it there. The grip itself is smooth, but then the body has kind of this crosshatch pattern going on to it. Other pens, Faber-Castell's got a Guilloche pen that's going to be coming out. They have other ones like their Op Art and things like that that have a bit of texture to the body as well. If it's just on the body and it's not on the grip, it probably doesn't matter as much. I don't think that really bothers as many people, but for sure, if you want to feel that texture, you can on that one. Another one I have is the Pilot Justice 95. I didn't grab that one, I forgot, but that one is a nice one too. A couple different patterns. They make it in a barley pattern as well as a kind of a stripe pattern. We only have the stripe one, not the barley, but that's another one. And then like a Pilot Sterling here. That is a little more expensive pen, so maybe not as commonly known about, but for sure it's engraved in here. And the engraving has some of that texture to it too. I probably just wanted to show this off a little bit. And then the last one I had is actually, I could not find my TWSBI Mini, but excuse me, but a TWSBI Mini or a 580. Is worth mentioning too. The body of that pen, that part of the diamond part of that name is where the texture part really kind of comes into play. And that one has a bit of texture to it too. So I personally like them. I do not find them to be bothersome at all, but it is absolutely polarizing, and I 100% understand why that is a factor for some folks. So I would definitely, if you have experienced any of these pens for yourself, you would know. And if you have a pen meetup group or anything like that, or if you know anybody that has any types of pens, just try them out. Or if you know that you're particularly bothered by texture, then maybe steer away from these, because it's definitely something that's going to bug you over time if it's something that bothers you at all. But it's a really important thing, the way that the pen feels in your hand, and that's one of the major disadvantages of being an online retailer, is that I can't let you hold the pen before you buy it. So, but it is the kind of thing I think it's worth just kind of noting that if you do buy a pen from Goulet Pens and you get it in your hand and you feel it and you're like, I just can't, this is just not for me, and you send it back, you haven't inked it up, you haven't used it or anything like that, we'll give you a full refund on it and you can exchange it out for something else. If you ink it up and use it for a while, well, then we got to talk. But if you're just, this tactile thing, that's something that you can very much get a feel for without actually, inking up and writing with it. So just keep that in mind. Cool. All right, next question. This is from Weeksy on Instagram. Hey Brian, you've talked about the Aurora 88 Flex and its extra ink reservoir before. This sounds great, but why does Aurora label it as an extra ink reservoir and not a larger ink capacity? Why not, instead of creating another chamber for ink, just make the first reservoir larger? Loving the Q&A, listen to past and present episodes every day. Every day! Well, thank you, I appreciate that. I'm very honored by that. I don't know how you put up with me every day, to be quite honest with you, but well, let's talk about the pen though. Okay, so I did not grab an 88. I suppose I could, but the one that I have is inked up right now, and I can't easily demonstrate what I'm talking about with it inked up. So I grabbed an Aurora Optima, which has got the exact same filling mechanism in there, so I can still accomplish the same demonstration to you without having to get ink everywhere. So what you're talking about is the ink reservoir, and that probably is reservoir could mean a lot of different things, but it's not actually like a completely separate and defined chamber for ink. And without understanding exactly how this thing is designed, maybe you're thinking it's a larger ink capacity than it really is. The intention behind this kind of second reservoir thing, it has to do with the way that the piston's designed. And honestly, if I had the right tool to be able to unscrew the piston mechanism out of the back, I would show you more easily, but I do not have that. So it requires, it's kind of like a Mont Blanc if you've ever messed around with those. It requires like a little fork type tool to get in here and unscrew. I probably could make it happen if I really tried, but I don't know if I want to experiment like that on a $500 pen. Not 500, under $500 pens, $400 pen. Still enough to where I don't want to try that. Anyway, so the way that their pens are designed, they have a nib unit in here that goes all the way up like this. I would say this is a pretty long nib unit for the pen. It just unscrews right out of the pen. It's totally cool and normal, and that's fine. But it's got this long post that comes up in the top here. And when you have this screwed into the pen, you can actually see it right there in the ink window. The post goes all the way there. Well, what happens when you are using the pen? So you're filling it, that's cool, but when you're filling the pen, it fills from this ink, hole, basically. It's kind of down here. Real formal term, right? Ink hole. But it's got holes pretty much down here that are filling through the pen. It's coming out of the reservoir, out of the, sorry, my terminology is super off today. It's coming out of the post here on the back of the nib unit, and it is going on to the ink reservoir. But if you look down here, and it's going to be hard to tell, I'm going to try and zoom in a little bit so you can see what's going on, because it is something clear in here. And when I say clear, I mean like transparent, not clear as in easy to see. But if you look, I have the piston right there. See that? So the piston is going up and down, and it's kind of a long piston, and it's hollow on the inside. So the piston is going onto the outside walls of the reservoir, but it also has an empty chamber on the inside there. That's the ink reservoir that Aurora is referring to. So what's happening when you're filling the pen is it's actually going all the way down over top of that post on the back of the nib unit. And then when it's drawing it up, it fills that little reservoir inside there. And then it kind of spills over, and then it fills the inside of the chamber of the pen. But it's actually got some ink that's left up inside of that piston. So you leave that up there, with the piston filling pen, you just leave it up. You don't have to do anything with it. It just writes and writes and writes. The ink level goes down and down and down and down. Your pen is empty. And then what you do, and when it's empty, say you're in the middle of a meeting and you don't want to just get up and leave and go fill your pen, and you don't carry 20 pens in your person like I do. Well, you just unscrew the reservoir down. That ink that's in there makes contact with the back of your feed, and you're able to write and finish up your meeting, finish up whatever it is you're trying to do, and then you can go and fill your pen. That's what Aurora is talking about when they're talking about an extra ink reservoir. It's really just meant to be, well, really any kind of reservoir, it's not meant to be like something that's going to last you very long. It's kind of like having a spare tire in your car. You're not like, why don't you just make your regular tires better and then you'll never need a spare? Well, it's really there in case of emergencies. Like if something happens to your regular tire, then you have your spare. It's kind of the same thing. It's like, well, if you run out of your ink chamber and it's completely empty and you need just a little bit more to finish up your meeting, then you can go and do that, and then you can carry on and then go fill your pen after you're done. So that's what it's for. It's not so much that it increases the ink capacity, because you're really not going to get a ton more. You're going to get maybe a couple of pages more out of it. It's going to be enough to kind of just, hobble along until you're able to get to your ink bottle. But it is going to allow you to continue to function. And that's really what it's for. It's probably, I haven't measured exactly how much, but it's probably no more than 4% of the total ink volume of the actual reservoir. So if you were just to add 4% into the reservoir, you wouldn't even notice. But having that little extra bit there is going to give you a little bit more, enough to carry you out of that meeting. And that's going to be your point of your reservoir. So it's kind of like having the empty light that comes on in your car. It's like you have a gas gauge, you have an ink window, you can see when your ink level's getting low, but even still, you get that light that comes on, you're like, oh man, I got a little bit left and then I got to go ink up. So that's how it works. All right, this question is from mdgirlforlife on Instagram. When a pen is too wet of a writer, is it because of the ink, nib, feed, or a combination of all three? And is there a way to modify this? Too wet of a writer. So I haven't done a lot of videos like specifically about wet writers and stuff like that. I feel like I may have talked about it in Q&A, but I honestly can't remember. So I thought I would just cover it again because it's pretty good. And I get asked this kind of stuff a lot, especially in our customer care team and stuff like that. It does happen, you know, sometimes you get a pen. Most of the time people get pens and they feel that they write too dry. It's not as often that you feel a pen is too wet of a writer, unless usually what happens half the time is you got a nib size that's larger than what you actually prefer and you just need to get a different nib size. So that right there could be part of the issue. But assuming it's just you like the nib, you like the size of the line that's down, but it's just putting too much ink down on the page. Excuse me. All three of these things can be a factor. You know, the nib, the feed, the ink. And I'll say the paper too can also be a factor. I'll kind of throw that one in there. You didn't mention that one, but that can definitely be a factor. Try it on different paper. But the absorbency of the paper, the more absorbent it is, the quicker it'll dry, but it'll also spread more. So depending on what it is that it's making it feel too wet to you, you may be able to kind of adjust that even just with the paper. But anyway, I think out of the three that you mentioned, the ink is the easiest one to kind of adjust to see, because if you're using a particularly wet ink, you know, a lubricated ink like a Noodler's Eel series, or, you know, particularly wet flowing ink like a quick drying ink, those tend to write rather wet, then I would say try adjusting the ink. Try using a different ink, see if that has any positive effect for you. You can probably find a color that's really close to what you have, but in a different brand or something like that, that might be good. That's where ink samples can help out. You can try them out and stuff like that. Find something that's kind of just right for you. After that, the nib is probably gonna be the next best thing to attack. You can modify the nib in order to decrease your wetness. The thing I'll say is it's not necessarily super easy to do all the time. So if you know what you're doing and you are confident doing it, that's great, and I'm glad that you know how. But not everybody is comfortable or capable or anything like that. It requires some, I hate to say intermediate level skills. It takes a little more than just a basic understanding of how the nib alignment stuff works to be able to do it. So just for an example, I'm going to use my Edison pen here, which I'm going to talk about in a second. You're like, what the heck color is that? But I'll talk about it in a second. So you have your nib, say it's writing just a little bit too wet. I want it to write a little bit drier. Well, part of that might be because the tines are a little apart. You need to bring it back together if that's the case. What you do to bring that back together is you just take your fingernails and you take your nib, and this is probably gonna just wig you out, but you take and you put your thumb and your forefinger on the pen and you twist so that one tine actually overlaps on top of the other, and you'll hear it kind of snap back in place. And then you do that again the opposite direction. So I'll do it again, you know, kind of the other direction. So that. And you just kind of do that a few times. And what you're doing is you're kind of bending and forcing your tines to come in a little bit closer together. Now when you do that, you could be kind of knocking your tines out of alignment. So then you need to be able to look at your tines, get them properly aligned. Using a loop helps incredibly in order to be able to do that. And then make sure that they're aligned back correctly again, and then write, and if you've done it properly, your pen is going to write drier. Now it's definitely possible to get it to write too dry to the point where you get flow problems, and then you got to open it back up a little bit. So it definitely takes a little bit of, you know, wherewithal in order to be able to do that, but that's one way that you can kind of adjust that a little bit. Another way that you can do it, if you have a pen that you can remove the nib, you know, like this Edison, for example, is I can pull this nib out, and ooh, this nib looks like it's got a little ink on it. How about that? I guess I need to clean this one out. So this one, in order to help to kind of accomplish something similar, is I can push on the wings with my thumbs, and then just kind of push down towards the towards me. Okay, so I'm pushing back on the wings a little bit, and I'm pushing on the tip of the nib, and I'm just kind of bending it this way a little bit. Okay, and that's going to help to bring the tines together a little bit. And then I can do the same kind of thing. I can twist, I can adjust. Because sometimes what happens, this adjustment I'm talking about right now is usually the case if you've pressed too hard on the nib and the tines have splayed a little bit, splayed up maybe. That's a way that you can bring it back down. It's not really easy to do while it's installed on the pen. So that's where you really need to be able to get the nib off the pen. But if you can do that, if you got, you know, a nib that's kind of, you know, wonked out like that a little bit, or it's splayed too much, that's where you can push on the wings, push down towards you, on the tip of the nib, and that kind of gets it back into place. And then you can reinstall it back on the pen and then make your kind of fine-tuning adjustments to make sure that it fits right on there. And you see here as I'm explaining it, some of you are probably just like, Brian, you lost me like at the very beginning. I would never do that to my pen. It terrifies me. That's probably where you're crossing into a place where you may not want to go here, and that's totally understandable. The thing I will say is you're getting into some like nib modification type stuff here. It's not permanent modification. This can all be undone, but you're definitely getting to a place where if you were talking to a company that was looking at a warranty type situation and you were telling them that you were doing this kind of stuff, they'd be like, you've done this to your pen, so we're not going to cover this, or we're going to make you at least pay, to kind of help out for our fixing this. And so just kind of understand that that's where you're crossing into this territory. But if you have a pen and you're like, yeah, I'd like to experiment, or it's out of warranty, whatever, I'm just going to do it, just kind of have that in mind. Lastly, you mentioned the feed. If it's too wet of a writer, yeah, the feed is definitely a contributing factor, but there's not really a lot that you can do to make a feed write drier. You can do some stuff to make a feed write wetter, which I won't even get into because this is definitely not your problem here, but there's not a whole lot you can do to make it drier unless you replace the feed with something else. And honestly, there are some feeds that can be interchanged, but first off, you can't really get spare feeds, so it's not even really practical to do that. It's like, oh, if I have a whatever Edison, I'm just going to get a different Monteverde feed and try fitting on that. Well, you're not going to be able to get one anyway, so that's kind of frustrating, but it's just not that universal. So, and then you get into just slightly different shapes and all kinds of stuff. It gets to be kind of a mess. So it's really not practical or feasible for you to be able to do that kind of on your own. So I would kind of I'm mentioning it to kind of validate the question that you have here, but that's kind of what you have to accept. So hopefully that's something that can help you out here. And then if it just isn't working after that, consider getting maybe a smaller nib size, consider exchanging the pen, or, getting it to a friend and getting a different one, something like that. That's kind of be your option. Or, exchanging with your, talking to your retailer, you may be able to nib swap at the manufacturer. Sometimes that can happen, but that's the kind of situation you're getting into there. Cool. All right. So this is from Nguyen Domsky on 13 on Instagram. There are gold, steel, and titanium nibs to my understanding. There are brass and copper pens that use these nibs. Why are there not copper or brass nibs to match the pen bodies? Perfectly reasonable question. Why wouldn't it be cool, wouldn't it be cool to have a brass kaweco all sport that had all that patina on the body carry over onto the nib? Or is it just not feasible and it would ruin the ink below? So I tried to do a little bit of research on this because you're right, there's really basically nothing out there. I was able to find some like old, vintage type pens that have copper. No, brass, sorry. Brass. But brass is pretty much not used on nibs today at all. I think it was a very inexpensive alternative to stainless steel, but it's not preferred, and part of the reason is because it corrodes when it's in prolonged contact with water and ink, and one of the components of ink is salt, and salt doesn't do well with copper or brass. So what's going to happen is you're going to get some of that patina effect, but what it's going to do is it's actually going to corrode the nib, and then the ink's not going to flow through it properly. So it's going to get fairly frustrating fairly quickly when it does that. So I don't know if there's any other reasons beyond that why they're not used, but I think that pretty much right there negates it. I have seen a couple of pens out there that for aesthetic reasons have done plating on the nib that have given it a brass color. Or something like that. I think about a pen that I had. Actually, let me wheel over here to my cabinet and grab it, just because I forgot to grab it earlier and I wanted to show it to you. This is a pen that I like to show. Oh my gosh. Okay, here we go. So one pen that we had done a while ago, one that's near and dear to my heart. Didn't know what I had at the time. The Delta Unica that we did in the orange celluloid, which is just ridiculous because this is at the price we had it to. But it's got a gold-plated nib that's a brushed gold that really does look a lot like brass. So that's the kind of thing that I've seen. I've seen aesthetic things that are looked to mimic it, but it's not going to patina like brass or anything like that. So that's kind of situation you're in there. But it's always fun to kind of bust that pen out. It's not available anymore. It's the only one I got. I'm not going to give it to you. Don't ask. Copper would be kind of cool too, but you know, you're going to run into the same kind of thing. It's going to be, well, actually, now that I think about it, because copper is used for piping and stuff like that. But the situation you're going to get in there is I think it's the other stuff that's in the ink, the salt and the other kind of things that's not going to be good for the copper. It's not just the water that's running through it. It's some of the other stuff that's commonly used in ink. That's why stainless steel and gold, because of their corrosion resistance, that's why they're used for nibs, and titanium too. You really don't see much outside of those. Palladium, that's in the, you know, the platinum family, so that's also very resistant as well. Those are really kind of the only four that I really hear about. So, you know, it would be kind of cool to see more aesthetically, yes, I think, but, you know, kind of the most that I think you're going to get that I've seen in terms of nibs is, you know, like the Nemesine, you know, fired nibs like that, sort of like, it's like the Kaweco fire blue, you know, kind of thing. Of course, this nib doesn't fit on the fire blue, but it's kind of that same thing. It's a finish that's applied to a stainless steel nib, and that's why it looks as cool as it does, but that's about it. All right, I got a couple of personal questions here, and I'll close it out for the week. But yeah, we still got a little time together here. All right, so they're personal, but they're both pen related, so it's cool. All right, Michael Pierce 2K on Instagram asked, "What's a limited edition pen that you missed out on or regret not getting?" The one that got away. I'll be honest with you, I don't really live my life with a whole lot of regrets, and that includes my pen life. Now, I hedge against that because I pretty much buy every pen that finds my interest, with the exception of a lot of like high-end limited edition stuff like that. But a lot of that stuff I don't get too emotionally attached to, just because it's like, yep, nope, got young kids, I got other things, I buy a lot of pens already, I'm just not gonna get attached to these pens. So there's definitely some cool ones out there, but I don't really have a lot of lingering like, oh my gosh, if only I had bought such and such a pen, my life would be complete. I really don't have any of that. Just gotta be honest, and I felt like I just needed to kind of, you know, address that, because I know that a lot of people do have that, and that is part of what fuels some of that FOMO, you know, that fear of missing out. When you're talking about limited editions and stuff like that, the fear is real, because a lot of limited editions do really run out and go away and do not come back, and they're hard to get later on. You know, case in point, that Aurora, not the Aurora, Delta Unica in the orange celluloid. We only got 100 of them, and they were gone like in 24 hours or something crazy like that. I forget, this is several years ago. But they are not coming back. They're not. So things like that, if you missed out on that, yep, it's gone forever. And maybe you regret that, but I got one, so I don't regret it. But anyway, sorry, being a jerk, rubbing it in your face. But no, the only pen that I thought was really kind of cool, that I think would probably be the closest thing would fall into what answers your question, is Omos. You know, I loved Omos. We were their retailer for like a hot minute before they went away. I never got an Omos 360. That's the triangular pen. That's kind of cool. Now, of course, I could go secondhand. I could get them. They're still kind of around and available. It's not like it's impossible. And I didn't have like a particular limited edition that I kind of am hanging on to. It's just I kind of always wanted that model of pen, but I'm really okay not having that. That's okay. If I had a lot of Q&A questions asking about triangular pens, I would probably get more upset about it, but I'm okay with not having the pen. But they have one, this celluloid called an Arco celluloid, and they have some Omos 360s that they did in that Arco celluloid, which is really pretty cool. They use that celluloid in a lot of different pens, but it's a really cool, almost looks kind of like wood, but it's very sparkly and a lot of depth to it. It's pretty darn cool. So maybe one of those, but other than that, I don't really have a lot of regrets. Cool. All right, the last question I have for this week, this is from onyzephyr on Instagram. Is there any special edition pen you'd like to see? Like if you could wish for a pen inspired by a TV show, band, movie, book, video game, what would it be? Personally, I'd love to see a Twin Peaks or Blade Runner collection. Cool. Sadly, I don't know what either of those things is. I think I know what Blade Runner is, but I honestly don't. I don't watch a lot of TV. I do watch some, but honestly, in the TV shows, like the most thing, and then like on bands and stuff like that, like I'm really eclectic with my band mix, and I'm not super devoted to any one. Movies kind of the same. Yeah, like I've got kids, I've got this business and all that. I don't read any fiction, even video games. Yeah, I'm not super attached to anything, to be quite honest with you. So this isn't a question that I've really developed a stupendous answer for, but I thought it was really probing and interesting for you guys. So I wanted to at least answer something. The one thing that I had, and honestly the reason I took the answer to this question was so I could show you this one particular pen that was an Edison Nouveau Premier, and I don't think I've really talked about it like, you know, out there because it was a prototype. So this is the only one that's out there. Maybe somebody has done up a custom Edison one, but I probably doubt it. So this may very well be the only one that's out there. But it is this brown and white and yellow pen, very banana themed. And me and Rachel are big Arrested Development fans. So we unofficially called this pen the Banana Stand in an homage to Arrested Development, if you're familiar with that show at all. So we never did anything with it. We never advertised it. And honestly, if we were to try to sell a pen that was called something related to a movie or a book or a TV show or anything like that, it would have to be officially licensed and all that kind of stuff, and the cost would be through the roof, and a small retailer like us couldn't really afford to do that anyway. But just kind of letting you know, like off the record, unofficially, this pen, which again is not for sale, please don't sue me, is what we call the Banana Stand. So kind of funny. I'm also a fan, I like a lot of comedies because like I work really hard all day. Rachel and I, we've always kind of been into comedies, but like we work really hard. And the last thing that personally, like she's into dramas and stuff, I will watch them because I love her and like to watch things together with her. And I'm just like a squirrel, you know, I get distracted easily, especially in my downtime. So if something's on TV, like I cannot work and watch TV at the same time. Or if I'm like trying to read and the TV's on, I'm like reading, but then I'm just kind of like watching TV. And then I'll like maybe glance at the book and then something will happen. I'll look up. I can't multitask like that. It's just not possible. So for me, I'd like to watch comedies. Really, honestly, like 30 Rock and The Office and Seinfeld and all that kind of stuff. You know, it doesn't even have to be really current things. I have a few kind of current things to watch, but I like the classics. I like watching 30 Rock. That show is very clever. So maybe like a Jack Donaghy themed pen there or something related to some of these other shows. The Office, I don't know if there's anything there, but I was trying to think through this question. I was like, wow, what would be a good themed pen? Honestly, drawing up some blanks. I don't know. Maybe it's like, wow, this really isn't my strength to be able to do this kind of stuff. But anyway, just gives you a little insight. Really terrible, boring, not super entertaining insight, but that is kind of the way that I think about it. Now, the one thing that I did have that was like, oh, okay, this would be kind of a cool, this would be kind of a cool theme pen. Okay. So Fig Boot on pens, just did an interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson, which I thought was pretty darn cool. And so I appreciate kind of, he had a lot of pens that he was showing, and he's really into like space themed pens because, he's a astrophysicist and all these other spacey, cosmetician, what, I'm totally botching his titles. But anyway, he's a space dude. So having a Cosmos themed pen, especially because like he was really impacted by, oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on his name. The guy who did the show, the Cosmos, oh my gosh. Drew's gonna kill me. Drew loves both of these guys. Peter Sagan. Carl Sagan. Oh my gosh, I'm embarrassed. Well, oh well, that's what you get with Q&A. It's not live, but it's about as close to it because I'm not gonna edit that out. But anyway, so Carl Sagan, a Carl Sagan Cosmos kind of themed pen would probably be pretty cool. Neil deGrasse Tyson would probably be digging that pretty hard. So that'd be kind of neat, but that's personally not like my greatest interest, but I think that would be kind of fun to see. Beyond that, I don't really know, but I would love to hear some of your responses, but that's not the question of the week. However, I have answered all my questions, so I'm actually going to end a little bit early, give you some time back today, which hopefully you are okay doing, but if you are if you're like Weeksy here on Instagram, then you are going to be okay rewatching other things because you like to watch it every day. But anyway, so that's all I've got for this week. My question of the week is, what fountain pen gives you FOMO, or fear of missing out? So what pen do you feel compelled to buy? Or do you have any kind of pen regret or anything like that you haven't bought? I'd be very curious to know. Not that I can do much about it, but you never know. Sometimes if I get a lot of upswelling of information, requests of certain types of pens, I can encourage those manufacturers to, hey, maybe you guys should bring this back. like I have that kind of power, but I can at least make the suggestions. So that'd be kind of cool if you just answer that. Good entertaining question there for you. A lot of the pens I talked about today you can get on gouletpens.com. You should definitely subscribe to all the channels and all the things would be great. So if you've enjoyed this one, and I hope you have a great weekend and a fantastic rest of your week. Right on.